Hi and welcome back to the course. One way to learn about theories is to think about how they are constructed. But how do researchers construct theories? In this session I will talk about two common methods for developing theories. In social science it's often called the logical deductive method and the inductive method. I will start with the inductive method. The inductive method means that researchers start from an observation of a phenomenon and use these observations to build concepts, relationships between concepts, and ultimately a subjective and local theory explaining what's going on in the phenomenon that is being studied. Let's say we want to create a theory about people's relationship to coffee habits. We might interview a coffee drinker asking questions about the person's coffee habits. The person might describe that the first cup of the day is absolutely the best. The person might continue by saying that coffee drinking has become a routine, almost like a morning ritual. Maybe the person associates the coffee drinking with morning meetings at the workplace. When you ask further, the person may tell you that coffee drinking has a backside. If the person don't get coffee in the morning, it becomes very difficult to concentrate and carry out the work. When you're back home, you sit down in front of your desk and you start to go through the interview and you search for interesting themes about the person's relationship to his or her coffee habits. You may notice that the person makes a difference between the first and the second cup of coffee. You may also note that drinking coffee has become a routine for the person, and that the person sees coffee drinking as a social activity. Finally, you note that drinking coffee has a backside. The person feels very dependent on coffee. By identifying important themes or codes, you have taken the first steps towards creating your concepts in the theory. You use the data that you collected to create concepts and relationships between concepts. Just like the map maker, you remove details that are not important and you emphasize aspects that you think are important to your understanding of how the person you interviewed relate to drinking coffee. The themes, the first cup of coffee in the morning, the morning ritual, drinking coffee as a social activity, the dependence of coffee represents emerging concepts in your theory. But you have also started to organize the concepts. You have started to relate them to each other. How are the themes related to each other? Which theme is most central to the person's coffee drinking? Perhaps it's coffee drinking as a morning ritual that is the most important theme, and that the first cup of coffee, the dependence of coffee, and the social aspects of drinking coffee, they are some kind of expressions of the morning ritual. If this is the case, this means that we can arrange our codes in a hierarchy with morning ritual at the top and the first cup of coffee, the dependence and the social aspects as concepts included in the ritual. Your emerging theory of how the person you interviewed relate to coffee habits describes coffee habits as a morning ritual with 3 subcategories. You can then choose to explore your emerging theory further by giving it more credence and more legitimacy by interviewing more people. So this is basically the inductive method. The logical and deductive method involves a different approach to theory construction. Here, researchers formulate a plausible theory by using already invented theories or logic and tries to formulate a test of the theory by testing the derivations of the theory. Its predictions, basically what the outcome of the theory would be if it's true. Let's say we are interested in whether or not coffee drinking makes us more efficient at work. Since we previously have read medical articles outlining the mechanisms for how the caffeine in coffee makes people feel more energetic, we think it could be likely that coffee drinking also increase people's efficiency at work. Central concepts in the theory is caffeine and drinking coffee and people's efficiency at work. Unlike the inductive method, Unlike the inductive method, we already have a few concepts which we take from previous research or logic. We then use logical thinking to construct the theory of how people drinking coffee are affected by caffeine, which in turn should make them feel more energetic. And of course then increase their efficiency at the workplace. Remember that our underlying theory that caffeine makes people feel more energetic is not based on data we have collected ourselves. It's a theory that is entirely based on what previous researchers have identified as important concepts or variables. We don't need to collect that data. Our task is to test whether or not caffeine and coffee drinking also makes people more efficient at the workplace. After we have formulated our theory, we start collecting data to test whether or not our predictions can be falsified or supported. The inductive method for theory construction is often used when we know very little about the phenomenon of interest. It's useful when we want to explore new phenomena. It focuses our work to the creation of new insights directly from empirical observations. New concepts and new relations between concepts can be explored. The logical and deductive method is useful when we want to test the validity of theories more generally. The criteria for what is considered a good theory vary depending on whether you construct theories using the inductive or the deductive method. A researcher constructing a theory using the inductive method is usually concerned with the description and explanation of the specific phenomena the researcher have studied. In our case, the person who we interviewed about her coffee drinking habits. Does our theory manage to capture the most essential aspects of how the person relates to coffee drinking? Or did we understand it completely wrong? It might be that the person in question doesn't agree at all with the theory that we just created. A researcher working with the inductive method is usually not so concerned with generalization. The researcher is not interested in whether or not the theory can be applied to more phenomena than what she is studying. The main focus is on building new concepts and relationships between concepts that capture the essential in the phenomenon being studied. So we could use the inductive method to first build theories of how work is organized in factories, and then use the logical and deductive method to construct theories which we test on all factors in a given industry. It might be impossible to collect data from all factors in a given region or a given industry. So we might have to take a sample. A researcher working with the logical and deductive method is much more concerned with whether or not the sample he or she is using to test the theory represents the population. A theory that is constructed using the logical and deductive method is considered valid if its predictions can be supported by empirical data. Our model of caffeine is only good if we can find support that the people we are investigating actually seem to have a higher efficiency at work when drinking coffee compared to when they don't drink coffee. In practice, the two methods of constructing theory are interrelated. A theory that was created using the inductive method can be reformulated and used as a template to collect new data to test its validity more generally. In our case, it could be that we want to test whether or not coffee drinking is perceived as a ritual among people other than just the person who we interviewed. A theory formulated using the deductive and the logical method can also be reformulated and explored by contrasting it with rich qualitative data. We can explore new concepts or new relationships between concepts. Method books usually also mention a third method, the abductive approach. In my mind, this seems to be a combination of the first two, basically a combination between inductive and deductive, and a more description of the research process. And I will leave it outside of this session for that simple reason.